You're listening to the Served Up Show, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful content. Your hostesses, Bridget Albert, is best known as the Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with over 25 years of experience. And I'm Julie Milroy, best known for my passion for leading change and helping others grow in their careers. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hello, Served Up community. Julie here. On this episode, I'm honored to introduce you to Victoria Pelletier. Victoria is a 20-year corporate executive and board director. She's currently a managing director at Accenture. She is nicknamed the Turnaround Queen by former colleagues and employers. Victoria inspires and empowers her team and clients to change mindsets and drive growth in business, leadership, and culture. She shares with us her journey from COO at 24, president at 35, and CEO at 41. She offers suggestions and advice to be unstoppable. Victoria is a prolific, motivational, and inspirational speaker, discussing the importance of personal branding and its impact on professional growth, being an empathetic leader in empowering employees, and the power of DE&I on corporate cultures and building a life of resilience. And I can tell you personally, Victoria is resilient. Check out Victoria's speaker and leadership site at victoria-pelletier.com. Now sit back, grab your favorite Bloody Mary, and get inspired. Victoria, hi, welcome to Served Up. We're so happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Julie.
Victoria, I wanted to ask you to join us today because, at Served Up, we love to feature just different people from all different industries that might have a story that would inspire our listeners. And I know you've got quite the story. I've only heard bits and pieces of it, but why don't you just take us back and just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you grew up, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I will do my best to keep it as concise as possible for you. Your listeners might hear a tiny, tiny bit of an accent, and it's only when I say a couple of words, namely out and about. That will give me away as a Canadian. So I grew up in Canada, born on the East Coast, in Ottawa, grew up in Calgary, which I liken to Texas North, the Calgary Stampede and big oil and gas town. And so went to school there, and then I got relocated and went to Toronto right out of university, and have been Toronto, New York, and now Miami ever since. And interestingly, when you look at career aspirations and how much things have shifted, and maybe even some of the advice I give people around following their passions, I think I'm a classic example of that, in that I thought I was going to be a lawyer, probably since childhood, quite frankly. I jokingly say I think my mom made me watch too much of the TV series LA Law with her and fell in love. So that was the plan. But doing my undergrad, I worked in a bank in their contact center and got promoted really quickly, like within less than 6 months, into a leadership role, and stayed there and worked there throughout the rest of my university. So I came out to Toronto on an assignment for a month before I thought I was going to law school. And in the early days of, like, at the time they called it branch banking, no one was calling it digital banking back then, and had this great experience, and they loved me and offered me a senior role to come out. So I thought I was going to take a year off before law school. And if I loved Toronto and the East Coast, I'd stay there. Otherwise, I could always go back. And I did neither of those things, Julie. I never went to law school, and I never moved back out to Western Canada. I followed my passion. I ended up loving the corporate world. I loved being a leader. And I got recruited from that bank I'd been at for about 6 years to another one where I ran their discount brokerage operations in their contact center. And within a couple of years of that, I got recruited to be the COO of an outsourcing company because they had banking clients, because it was all about contact center. And that's was my experience. And so at age 24, as a new mom as well, I stepped into a massive stretch role as COO and progressed. And my whole career has been predominantly business to business, either to their customer or consumer or their employees in a lot of different industries and slices. In some cases, I've covered completely across the gamut. I spent a decade running corporate travel businesses, so know the travel and hospitality world quite well. I bought a company at one point. I've always had a side hustle. There's what you get paid to do during the 9 to 5, and then what you might get paid to do, but if not, it could be a passion project that grows into it and you're 5 to 9. And I currently lead the travel and hospitality portfolio for most of Accenture across North America. And I sit on a couple of boards and, get heavily involved in the startup community. I wrote a book, plan on writing another. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a wife. I'm a mom. I'm a fitness fanatic. There you go.
And you're a chief.
Yeah, that's right.
So what sets you apart, right? I think we've got so many people on their various career journeys, whether it's more creative and entrepreneurial, or it's more of kind of navigating through this corporate world. What sets you apart? Where did these leaders, what did they see in you? What was kind of your work style that set you apart, that gave you these different opportunities?
I think it's a couple of things. So I will readily attribute my success in a few different buckets. So the first is around performance. And I always felt like my ability to show up, deliver with a very strong work ethic, and usually deliver really well or effectively was within my control. So my ability to meet the deliverables, or when you get asked the question, what does success look like here? I was able to achieve those things. First and foremost, I was an avid learner. So my ability to even progress at the bank, I took, my securities license. That's how I was able to go and even look on the brokerage side, to continuing to look to develop myself would be one. Mm-hmm. And then the other, in terms of success, is around personal brand. It's around networking. It's around learning how to navigate and create boundaries. The other thing I would say in terms of the opportunities that have been given to me beyond the fact that I've performed and delivered well has been my shift in my almost maniacal focus on leadership and culture. And I didn't always get it right. I had to make some shifts because I think I probably had a bit of imposter syndrome at some point, or felt I just needed to show up in a very different way, being a very young executive, being the only woman at the table. So I might have showed up in a certain way. And so at some point, it took me a few years to, get it right. And I'm not going to say I get it right all the time, but I've now built such a very strong team who's engaged, and quite honestly, significant followership. So as I've moved every few years, and some of which due to the 18 mergers and acquisitions I've been involved with, many of my team want to come with me. I think that is a significant contributor to why I've been given new, different, more opportunity.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes, I had a leader once tell me that, how you're a great leader is based on the people that will follow you, right? Like, you can always say you're great, but depending on how many people actually want to follow you determines how good you are. So that's a great point. As far as, I think I like what you say around performance, right? I think it's really important. That's like our one controllable is how we perform. And then, really identifying where are different ways that we can continue our professional development. What are some ways that your performance had opened up opportunities for you? Like an example of going above and beyond. I feel like for a lot of us that are going up that corporate ladder, it is really about performing and over delivering to set yourself apart, but how do you show up and be noticed for the work that you're doing without constantly having to kind of, toot your own horn?
Yeah, I think, there's a big difference in being an individual contributor and then as you step into leadership roles. As an individual contributor, and I will tell everyone, actually, regardless of what role you're in, getting really clear on what the deliverables are, how success is measured in the eyes of the leadership, the shareholders, whatever, in the companies you work at. So I think understanding that uniquely is important, and then ensuring that you perform against those expectations. And that can mean upskilling yourself if there's elements of, the role or a task that you're not familiar with. It can be finding a mentor who's been there longer and has a greater expertise, and maybe some of that gray zone that you don't learn, from institutional knowledge from others can help. And then as a leader, success is measured in very, very different ways. If you own a P&L, okay, it's really clear. I've got to grow top line revenue by X amount year over year. We need to see Y profitability. But then there's all of these other client metrics or customer metrics, employee metrics. Now, as we look at ESG, are we one with profitability, with prosperity and sustainability long term, and meeting the need for all of the shareholders? So now when you step into that leadership role, performance is measured in so many different ways. And for me, you asked the question over like my performance and what did I do? A big part of my role as a leader, and I started in as an executive, my role was in outsourcing. And so people outsource corporate functions or activities, I jokingly, our mess for less that they pass off. And you're doing that through, people, process, and technology. But ultimately, a lot of that comes down to the people performing the work that's left that's not automated. And if they're not highly engaged, if you're not giving them the skills to be successful, then, you're doing a disservice to everyone. For me, part of the reason I've been so successful is my ability to be, one, radically candid. I don't know if your audience has heard the book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. I've always sort of operated in that. I'm going to have the difficult conversation. I'm going to lean into that discomfort, but I'm going to do it, one, because I care about the individual. Two, I care about our clients, our shareholders, et cetera. And a lot of leaders can't do that. I hate this phrase right now, quiet firing. It's really just passive aggressive leadership, in my opinion. People who just are afraid to have those kind of conversations. So for me as a leader, a big part of it has been not just me performing well on the tasks I personally own, but how do I lead the team? How do I coach and guide them? But how do I also have difficult conversations and work through a performance management process if I need to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, right? With all of the news lately around quiet quitting, quiet firing, and I feel like more than ever, almost every other person I'm talking to is in a career transition right now. What are your thoughts around that? Do you think this is just, where we are as an economy? Do you think it's a culture shift? I would love to know your thoughts on kind of the environment that we're in regards to the workforce.
I think it's a multitude of like external forces and some that have now come internal or intrinsically because, we were locked in our homes for 2 years. I was in New York when it first hit. So I could tell you it was much worse than, here in Florida in terms of my lockdown. For
your experience.
Yeah. And so I think it's a combination of, unemployment is, near the lowest it's been in decades. One, because employees were sitting in their homes and there was no separation between you're staring into, our homes, no separation. It caused a great opportunity for employees to reflect on what was really important to them. What kind of balance were they going to look to strike because there was none, because again, there was no separation. And then all of these other forces that have caused us to take a look at our values and purpose. And so I think it's that all of these factors coming together where employees can demand more, different, better right now. And there's a plethora of job opportunities out there. I was just looking, I think the September unemployment rate was, I can't remember, I just looked it up the other day. I can't remember if it's 3.5 or 3.75%. Immigration's the lowest it's been in decades, legal immigration, so, their employees are in a really strong position, to be, standing up for what they want. Consumers and employees are looking to work for companies that are much more aligned to their purpose, their mission, and the things that are important to them as well. And so employees are just, making a choice for change. And then the last thing I would state is the younger generation. I think of my son, who's 22, makes me feel quite old, and just graduating, soon to graduate college. His view of, and that generation's view of job security is not the same as mine or my parents. We know, and reality is, we know there's no real job security. But their view of it is, are you investing in me as an individual, in my skills? Are you going to ensure I stay relevant for future? So as our products and services shift, our strategy changes, what are you doing to help me grow along with that? That's their view of security. And so if they're not seeing it internally, they're opting to go, to other companies versus, our parents who would have just looked at it in terms of, you stay there a long time and just do the work, and maybe you're fortunate enough to have a, pension or 401k plan or something like that. That's a very different view. So I think it's all of those forces coming together, no one silver bullet that's kind of causing this shift in employee ideology and movement.
And it is a strange time, because I think, of course, my parents and how they related work is different from my generation. I think I'm like Gen X. I'm on the cusp of Gen X and millennial, I like to say, like right there. But I feel like growing up, and my relationship with my employer is like, thank you, right? Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I'm going to do the best that I can. And just like every day, be so grateful that you've got a job and you have an opportunity. And with this younger generation, it's totally different. It's like, what's in it for me? I don't feel like there's a sense of like loyalty, and that's okay. Not in a bad way that they're not loyal. Like, they're showing up, they're doing their job, but it's not, I need you to, fulfill my career aspirations or my professional aspirations. So, but then at the same time, where we do hear that that employees have the upper hand and whatnot, when you look at some of these, really ideal roles and jobs, there are companies that are letting people go as well, right? And not recognizing the talent that's in front of them. And, I feel like just as much I hear that the employees have the upper hand now, it also seems like it's the other way around, and that people are letting go, being let go and having to reassess their careers and opportunities. What do you think about that? Do you think it's specific to, a certain role where there's more opportunities or seniority within your career?
I mean, we're in interesting times right now with this sort of looming recession. And so I quoted some of the stats around unemployment. And so I think employers, even if not totally satisfied with their employees' performance, we're not letting them go, because the challenge in backfilling them was significant. Now we're starting to see some layoffs coming for sure, as everyone's sort of, pensive and sitting back to see exactly what's going to happen with our economy, and is a recession really coming. And so I've seen in some cases, some companies doing a broad base saying, hey, we're going to take the lowest 5% performing and exit them. It tends to hit, sadly, your frontline workers first, front to middle level. And, the senior executives tend to often be somewhat insulated by that, which, is a reality, but there's a pyramid as well. And I think industry wide, I think it depends on, where you sat. I think there's some industries that, particularly coming out of COVID, are still suffering. So I know a lot of your audience will be in the hospitality space, and you think travel and hospitality was one of the hardest, fastest hit when COVID hit in terms of who got laid off. And so there's now also this, what I'm going to say, brand or reputational damage that's been done that needs to be built back up. And it's not a challenge just for HR to solve. It's in combination with marketing and how do you look to, attract people back. And so I think that some industries and levels, you'll get people who are a little bit reticent to go in. And that's also potentially why you're seeing people look to explore, newer, different places to insulate or protect themselves a little bit in future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and speaking of the travel and tourism and kind of hospitality industry, and I know in your role working with Accenture, one of the largest consulting, organizations, and I believe globally, right? How do you work with some of these companies, and what is the direct impact and change that you've seen within that industry kind of post-COVID? Because we all know, and I think we see it and we feel it when we're out there as far as like the front line. And I know a lot of even our listeners and people in the trade have shifted, right? They've went from being the face of the bar or the restaurant or that front line to finding different ways to create a career in a more creative and maybe untraditional way, whether it's, through the virtual landscape or private events or consulting. What have you seen from kind of a bigger scope working with these industries?
It varies by subset, right? So airline versus hotel versus a cruise line, for example, very, very different experience. And so, I mean, for all of them at one point around sort of passenger health and safety and wellness and all those things to, protect us, that's still very much at the forefront. But for many of them, they were all on I'll say a digital transformation. And the reality is, regardless of whether you're a tech company or not, we are all technology companies. Yeah. Whether it's because of the products or services we sell, but otherwise technology enables us. And so every one of these companies was somewhere on that journey, whether it was a new reservation system they were looking to implement, whether it's a better guest experience that they wanted to create end to end. So what we saw is, a pause on the capital spend on all of those things. And again, laying off employees, just trying to keep the lights on initially. And now they're very, very slow to start to come back. To try and see revenue, return to at or pre-pandemic levels, to fund not only the ongoing operating expenses and start to invest to bring back, but also for some of these really key projects that, they had underway. And in some cases, they're literally, is a burning platform, old systems for finance and accounting and HR and all these kinds of things that like tax updates for payroll systems, pretty important to make sure we're all getting paid well. Well, that costs a lot of money, but at the same time, they're trying to figure out, how do we get involved in the metaverse? What does this Web 3.0 look like? How do you create immersive experience for, let's say, even great example, cruises? I know many of our chief women, fellow colleagues, have went on a cruise, myself included. And so look at the cruise line, how do you immerse yourself to choose a different cabin category type? One, how do you build a sense of community from the people that you meet on the cruise ship? How can you create that again, sort of in the metaverse? And so what we're seeing is this mix of we're trying to recover from where we were before, really, really stretched in hiring talent to do that for all the reasons we've already talked about. We had capital costs that were underway, but we actually really need to try and innovate because there's a different expectation for consumers and employees going forward. So it's one of the most difficult industries, I think, to work in for all of those reasons and many more we haven't spoken of today.
Yeah, absolutely. And where do you think the opportunity is? Like if you're one of these listeners looking at shifting in their career, going a different direction, but still love this crazy world of travel, tourism, and hospitality, where do you think the opportunity is? I love that you said everybody's a technology company. I mean, at Southern Glazers, we've been going through digital transformation for like the last 10 years, and we spoke all about that and we continue to, and it's great. I feel like COVID kind of exacerbated it, especially on our Proof Commerce, our commerce platform. Whereas a lot of like the B2Bs weren't ready to start buying online. They needed their salesperson and they still do, but it's amazing that as soon as everything shut down, our adoption rate like went through the roof. But I guess back to my original question is, there's so much talent in the industry. I think it takes a very unique type of person to really want to pursue tourism, travel, and hospitality. And, if they're in a shift in their career, which direction, what advice would you give them as far as where they should focus on, upskilling their skills, and in which direction is the biggest opportunity?
Well, I feel like my daughter, who now 18, but was 14 when she asked me the question, she's like, Mom, what should I do? Like, and I said, oh, there's a couple different paths I think you could go down. And one could be like a teacher. She's great with kids, and special needs in particular. But the stuff she talked her older brother into, right? I said, or you can go into sales. She's like, Mom, which of those do you think I should go to? And I'm like, oh, and she goes, and I said, I'm going to give you the advice that you should really follow your passion and what brings you joy. She goes, okay, no, but tell me which one makes more money? I'm like, okay. So I feel a little bit, Julie, that question's kind of like, when I had this conversation with my daughter, Jordan, because I think first and foremost, I'm going to tell people truly, truly best career advice is to do things that you enjoy doing. In the 80-20 rule, right? We have all got 20% of admin and stuff we're just not going to like, or maybe even people we don't like, but 80% of the time you should enjoy doing it. So figure out what that is. And there's this it's a Japanese philosophy, ikigai, and it's around what are you good at? What do you enjoy? Where can you make money? There's some great visuals your audience could go and Google and take a look at. And so I think that's it. But where are things moving and how are you going to maintain your skills and be relevant for future? So clearly digital skills are booming, but there's so much. It doesn't mean you need to be hands-on keyboard coding. You could help lead the team through the change that's associated with what that looks like. So from project management to communications to helping others reskill, for whatever change is coming. So I think there's a lot around. So the digital fluency and skills associated that for sure. But then the other thing is you look at all of the automation that's happening. And when, as business leaders and HR and talent professionals look at their employees, you go through this exercise of, again, look at your business strategy and products and services and where are you moving and what kind of skills and people are you going to need now and for future? And do you build the talent from within? Do you go and buy the talent? Do you automate? Do you outsource? There's all these, categories that you go through, but ultimately what gets left behind should be the superpower for the company and the people within it. And what gets automated and moves off, what is left are the human skills. And so that's the other thing, is digital fluency and technology and related areas to focus on, but then also what sits behind. You talked about salespeople. Well, that's a really, really unique skill. And so your ability to network, develop relationships and build rapport and identify value rather than just carrying a toolkit around to sell trinkets, right? That's a whole other skill. So I think there's a multitude of ways to go, but lean into the things that you love doing for which is in demand and you can get paid for and continue to grow your skills in that area.
I love that advice. I think, it's got to start with what you love. You've got to make money doing it. And, it's got to provide value. And I feel that as things get automated and a lot of functions are able to be automated, I like what you said, but the real superpowers are what's left, right? And the people that can go above and beyond, whether it is sales or anything like that. Very good advice. And what are plans for you? What are next steps for you? Tell us a little bit about your book and what do you plan to do next?
A corporate executive, but really an entrepreneur. So I'm always looking to create and innovate. So I see, my husband says I'm never going to retire. I will continue to shift how I earn income. I'm very fortunate that Accenture was great at letting me continue to do the things that I'm passionate about, like public speaking. I will ideally go back to being a C-suite executive. However, at some point, I love helping C-suite executives today, but I want to go back to being one at some point. So I will do that. I'll continue to sit on boards. I do have one co-authored book that I wrote. I do plan to write a full-length one on my own over the next couple of years. and continue to do speaking. That's one of the things that, brings me joy, engaging with audiences and in front of people and then connecting with them afterwards. So you're just going to see a shift in terms of this like corporate income here and speaking and other stuff over here to shift over time. And then ultimately I'll just lead as they call it now, the portfolio career and boards, spotty consulting engagements when I decide to do them, and speaking engagements.
Oh my goodness. That sounds super exciting. So how could our listeners follow you and find you?
So I have a website, which is just victoria-pelletier.com. Maybe it'll be in the show notes for your audience. Google me. I'm everywhere out there, which makes it a little scary when I interview people and they know a lot about me, or find me on LinkedIn.
Well, great. We will definitely find you on LinkedIn because I know you're very active there, and we appreciate so much you sharing all your nuggets with us. I feel like my mind is definitely going, there's so many different opportunities out there. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of future Served Up episodes. Cheers!